Welcome on in to the Zig Zone. I'm your host, Chaz McNeil, and I'm joined by an array of very talented Falcon Media Sports Network analysts. Going from my left to my right, we are joined by Henry Costco, the softball beat for Bowling Green. Henry, how are you doing today?
Well, I was saying about softball won their first game in MAC play. They went 1-0, but they fell twice on Saturday, so we'll talk a little bit about that.
And now, thank you for repeating that, Henry. Now we've got Tyler. Welcome. I was wondering what those looks were for too. I was a little confused.
I was tripped out because I wasn't here, and yeah.
Excited to be here, Chaz, after a fun week at the MAC tournament up in Cleveland, Ohio. Ready to talk about the men's and the women's tournament, along with a baseball team that is red hot to start conference play for the second year in a row.
They are absolutely on fire. Not a great showing by both basketball teams, but we'll get into that in just a second. Then going from Tyler to two brand new people on the Zig Zone, we've got Nathan Burkett. Nathan, are you excited for your first time on this show?
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to it all week, and here we are.
And then rounding out this star-studded cast, we got Kevin Hutchinson, also on his first time.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here. Super excited for my first Zig Zone.
Yeah, so let's just jump straight into it. We've got essentially the end of the winter sports period as the three big-name teams all ended up getting out in their respective playoff games. We're just going to go straight and do probably the biggest one, hockey. Against St. Thomas, they were in the semifinals of the Mason Cup. Going up against St. Thomas, ended up falling 3-1. Nathan, you are our respective hockey beat here. What really went on in this game that was different from what the Falcons normally did?
It wasn't Coach Willie's usual style of hockey. Coach Willie always preaches big physicality, lots of shots on goal. We did eventually outshoot them, but it took right to the last second to finally beat them in shots on goal. And crashing the net, getting pucks on that from the blue paint and from the slot. And for most of the game, St. Thomas, credit to them, they had a good defense for most of the game. They did not let BG get to the blue paint. Did not let BG get to the slot. They didn't let BG get good scoring opportunities. They didn't let them get rebound opportunities. So the majority of BG's opportunities just weren't that good. Stover did his best, but as Coach Willie said in the press conference after the game, it's going to be hard to win hockey games, especially in the playoffs when you only score one goal.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at this, St. Thomas, it's a team that the Falcons split against in the regular season, and they just really couldn't get many opportunities going. And one of the games that they had at the Stroh, I believe around a month ago, they were able to get a ton of shots on goal, but they weren't able to cash in. Kind of similarly, they didn't get as many shots on goal in this game, but still only one goal.
Yeah, in that game, Jake Seibel, who was the same goalie who played last night for St. Thomas, had 57 saves on 58 shots from Bowling Green. That was a career high for him. That was a program best for St. Thomas for a single game. And it was the most amount of saves that anyone in CCJ has made all year. The next closest was Noah West at Ferris State. He made 50 saves in a 8-0 loss to Wisconsin, which I think just shows that Wisconsin had 58 saves or 58 shots in that one game. They won 8-0. BG also had 58 shots in the game. We lose 2-1. It just sometimes comes down to, especially with Jake Seibel, he made a bunch of big saves, and he did it again last night. He didn't make as many crazy like Stover type saves where it's like, you can't believe it. Like they break the rules of physics in order to make the save. But he made the saves he had to. He made the creative ones when he needed to. And at the end, his team's going on to the finals against Minnesota State, and BG's going home for the year.
Yeah, and really disappointing when we had Ben on last week. If the Falcons did somehow manage to pull out the Mason Cup, they would have ended up in the if they win the Mason Cup, they would have ended up playing that first game of the Frozen Four in Toledo. So a little bit of a missed opportunity there, but let's go through a little bit of the good. You got the one goal by Ethan Scardina. Do you want to walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, Scardina had a one-time opportunity a couple moments earlier, got saved by Seibel. They regrouped. Sternberg got to Norris, who gave it to Scardina right in the slot, which is an area that BG struggled to get to throughout the game, and he was able to capitalize and fire it past Seibel, and the graduate co-captain playing in what we now know was his last college hockey game got a goal, and it was a good goal. That was BG's only goal of the game. There's a couple other good scoring opportunities throughout the game, but none were as good as that.
And, I mean, a disappointing end to the first season for Dennis Williams, for Willie, but, I mean, there was a lot of good to come out of this season. The whole reason you make that head coach hire, you end up firing Ty Agner, bringing in Willie, is because you want to win in the postseason. The Falcons, they did end up doing that against Michigan Tech, looked really strong in that opening series, and then just got up against a really good St. Thomas team, unable to really capitalize as much as you would have liked to see, but you're right. St. Thomas moves on for a chance at heading to the Frozen Four, I believe.
It would just be the NCAA tournament originally.
Okay. So then moving up a little bit, what are some of the season's now officially over for Bowling Green hockey? What are some of the things that the team needs to do now heading into the off season?
Well, first I would take some time to look back at how well the team did. It was the first time we've won a playoff series in 5 seasons. It was the first time we won a home playoff series in 6 seasons. It was the first time we had a winning record in 3 seasons. So a lot of good from Coach Willie. Also, it's not typical for a new hockey coach in college hockey to come in and have immediate success. You look at some of the other teams in the area who got new coaches, like Miami University, Northern Michigan. Northern Michigan went 5-27-2. Miami went 3-28-3, and they didn't have a single conference win. That being said, they are in the NCHC, which is one of the best hockey conferences in college hockey, but still. So to show that Willie came in right away, got a winning record, won a playoff game, it really just shows his style as a coach. Looking towards next season, there's a lot of positives to look forward. Obviously, you have, unfortunately, you have the seniors and graduates. There's 12 of them who will be leaving this team, including Christian Stover, who's our big star goalie, and both our captains, O'Hara and Scardina. But we still have a lot of talent in this roster for next year who are going to be returning. Also, we have a great recruiting class, including multiple star talents from the CHL, which will be brand new to NCAA, as previously the CHL was not. If you played in the CHL, you were not eligible to play college hockey. But with this new year, they reversed that rule. So now, Coach Willie, he has a lot of connections. He coached in the WHL, which is part of the CHL, for multiple years. He coached Team Canada's World Junior team multiple times. Through those connections, he has been able to recruit so many star talent players. So now BG has the second best recruiting class in the nation, only behind Boston University. So you take the talent that already has been playing here, add on to the talent that will be coming soon, starting next year through our amazing recruiting class. And I feel like we'll have a good year next year, probably even better than this year. And I'm going to say this on air, my official prediction, BG will be back in the NCAA tournament within the next 4 years.
Okay, that's a very big claim. We're going to end up writing that down and seeing if that holds true. We're at the 9-minute mark here on the recording, so making a quick note of that. So I want to say, you mentioned some of the losses, some of the additions, and at the end of the day, who do you think the biggest loss will be, and who do you think the biggest addition into this recruiting class will be?
The biggest loss is going to be Christian Stover for sure. Star goaltender, had a standout year. Just going through where he finished in BG's career, like records for the program, he finished tied for 6th in career goals against average, tied or 7th for career save percent, or sorry, 7th place in career save percentage of program history. He is 5th in all-time career save percentage of program history. 6 in career shutouts. He had 6 throughout his entire career. He had 3 this year alone. And looking at this year alone, which is where you really see how good he was, at the conclusion of last night's game, even though unfortunately it was a loss, he was able to officially clinch first all-time in program history for both season goals against average and season save percentage. So he'll be a big piece that will be missing. That being said, BG is going to get a lot of great players from their recruiting class. For example, off the top of my head, we have a lot of really good defensemen. We have 3 defensemen coming in next year from the CHL. We have 2 of the leading scorers in the WHL with Braden Crampton and Leslie Mazden. And then we also have Ty Higgins from the QMJHL, and he's one of the leading defensemen, point-scoring defensemen in the QMJHL, which that's kind of been an issue so far for BG. Like, our defensemen are usually very good defensively, not always the best offensively. So adding in these pieces, especially on the back end, for the defensive core, it'll definitely help the team. We also have some star players coming up on the front end. Brandon Wynot, he's a point-per-game player in the WHL. Connor Levis, he's also in WHL. He has a lot of talent. He's been playing in the WHL for multiple years now. He's played, I believe, for Team Canada at different tournaments. He's actually played in the AHL before under a PTO, which usually if you play in the AHL, you wouldn't be allowed to play in NCAA. However, since it was just a professional tryout, they're making an exception for him. So he's played 2 games in the AHL with the Winnipeg Jets system. He's a draft pick of the Winnipeg Jets, and I feel like he'll be very good.
Now, I do want to offer a question up to anybody in the room here. With how hockey has performed so far, or I guess how hockey had performed this entire season, you compare it to all the other sports we've already seen the seasons conclude on. You look at football, you look at volleyball, and then both basketballs, which we'll get into a little bit later. Is it a stretch to say that hockey has had the most successful season of any of the BGSU athletics teams so far?
Sorry. Yeah, you first.
You go, Kevin.
Oh, thanks. I think given the expectations for the team, yes. I mean, obviously, hockey's something that this community values a lot. I mean, you see the turnout at the games, but sort of like Nathan had previously said, just the having a first-year head coach in the building, expectations aren't always super high, just because there needs to be time for adjustment. So I think the success that Coach Willie had kind of instantly, I do think sets hockey apart, and I think sets up a really bright future for this team.
Are we limiting this to revenue sports, or are we going non-revenue sports in this as well?
You know what, Tyler? You're the king of stretching the question, so let's stretch it as far as it can go. I'd say throw in non-revenue sports as well.
I think it's hard to pass up the track team. The women's track team. Multiple school records shattered, a MAC record broken, a MAC championship. I would say if we're including non-revenue sports, I think they've had the best one. But if we go revenue sports, I mean, they're really the only team to win a big tournament game and advance and get the excitement around the community that they did. So probably have to favor them in that argument. Yeah.
Well, I would make the argument. I think for volleyball, despite winning the regular season championship, and then despite their loss to Western in the MAC tournament, they had their deep postseason tournament run that got all the way to the final there in Arizona. So I would say that was probably the most successful. But considering the prestige that Danielle Tomich had over the years, and she obviously earned her job at Cincinnati, that now as a result of that run, I think you can look at hockey in under different circumstances. I think they achieved maybe to a certain level that might be equivalent to that, especially making the semifinal in Willie's first year, like Kevin mentioned.
I think in terms of sports that are done, because I think softball will be in this position by the time they're done with the season, I think it's safe to say hockey made the biggest improvement out of any of the revenue sports, winning a postseason series like they did, which is something they hadn't done really since any of the players that are on the current roster got here in Bowling Green. I think that's a huge achievement for the team, even though how it ended.
I think you're very right about that, specifically the part where you mentioned Michelle Gardner in softball. And this is no offense to softball at all. They are improving since last season. They've already reached their season win total from last year, and we're only about a month and a bit into the season. But I will say the fact that Willie came in here, had a better season than Ty Agner, who was a very well-respected head coach. The fact that Willie comes in, does a great job, wins a playoff series, and I mean, you combine that with the fact that, yes, the volleyball team had a very deep NIVC run. They had a very good and they did win tournament games, but they could not win a game in the MAC tournament. Obviously, you lose to a Western Michigan. That is a very, very good, very strong team that ended up winning the MAC tournament, but still, I think at the end of the day, you can't deny how well this team has improved, how consistent they had played throughout the season, where it was a really big test was we know they're going to perform well at the beginning of the year, but what's going to happen at the end? And the fact that they were able to wrap everything up in a nice bow, get to that semifinal game in the Mason Cup, didn't go out the way you want, but I also agree. I think I'd call it a success. But that being said, we've talked about hockey for a good bit, but I think we got to go from a good end to the season to what was a little bit more of a tougher one to see with women's basketball in the MAC tournament. That first round of the MAC tournament for women's basketball, that was just a brutal one. The Falcons head to Cleveland. They're in a pretty good spot. They were the 6th seed, end up going against the Buffalo Bulls, who head coach Fred Shamil has yet to beat in his career at Bowling Green. And they just fall 65-63. They got outscored 28-14 in the fourth quarter. Just something you can't have happen in a playoff game that massive. But yeah, Falcons get bounced a little bit earlier than you would have expected. I don't think many of us had them winning the MAC tournament. I don't think that was ever in question. But to go out the way that they did after looking so dominant through the first 3 quarters, it's just a very tough loss.
Yeah, Lucas Kleinmeyer, our women's basketball beat, not able to be here today. He's a little under the weather. But Henry Costco and I were both at the MAC tournament for all 4 days, so we should be able to hold this one down. Yeah, it's very disappointing for the team. 1, the way it happened, and 2, to get eliminated by Buffalo for a second straight season. They eliminated the Falcons in the quarterfinal round just like they did last season, and the main factor in both those losses was a player named Chella Watson, the graduate guard for Buffalo. She is phenomenal player, was named to the All-MAC tournament team. She scored 13 fourth quarter points. She nearly matched Bowling Green's points in the fourth quarter. Just completely took over the game. Bowling Green didn't have any answers. They played a perfect 3 quarters against Buffalo. They did that earlier in the season, the regular season too. Played a perfect 3 quarters against Becky Burke's Buffalo team, and in both games just collapsed in the fourth quarter. They let Chella Watson get hot, and you really can't do that. And they end up losing the game by 2. Crushing way to lose it. They had a chance to get another playoff and got stolen away, and that was kind of the end of it. So now you look at the women's basketball team. Fred Shamil came into this program when it was in a very good state. It still isn't a good state, but in an extremely good state off of a Fab 4 WNIT run. And now you're looking at his resume. He has not finished higher than 5th in the MAC regular season standings, and he does not have a conference tournament win to his name. So a disappointing end to the season for the Falcons.
And, the big thing was containing Shalia Watson, right? We saw in the Toledo game how successful they were defensively when they basically took Watson out of the game. She had one of the worst games statistically that she had
just
in her
12
entire
points,
career.
I believe. She had 9 up until the final minute of that game. It was a horrible shooting performance by her.
Yeah, and if she stayed at 9, it would have been the worst, the lowest point she scored. It was first time she's never scored double digits, right? I believe.
At least in the season.
Yeah,
I hadn't looked to see the career, but it would have been the first time this season that she didn't score double digits.
Yeah, and BG held Watson for 3 quarters, like we mentioned. It was just Buffalo out-adjusted Bowling Green. He out-adjusted Fred Shamil, and they made that change in the fourth quarter that got Watson over the top and got Buffalo on that run that eventually took them out of the game. But, it was some interesting performances just from BG in general. Amy Velasco didn't have a great game. She ended up fouling out towards the end of that one, which is, of course, disappointing for her considering all the success that she's had in her career and all the things that she's done for the program, going in there and having a tough game. And, that may potentially be their last game, the last time she steps on the floor as a Bowling Green Falcon, depending on if they end up going to play at a postseason tournament or not. Another thing we saw, Lexi Fleming was extremely emotional after the game and even in the press conference, which I think is a good indication of where her status stands as a player next year. I think it's fair to say that she's not going to be coming back next year, which is a thing that a lot of us kind of assumed, but I think is emphasized by that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at Fleming individually too, she was one of the leading scorers for the Falcons. Erica Porter was consistent all game long, but the guards kind of disappeared late for Bowling Green. It was a tough matchup for Fleming because she was matched up with Watson for nearly the entire game. And, Fleming's not the greatest defender out there. She's not the worst either. She is a good defender for Bowling Green, but Fred Shamil talked about post-game that you need 5 players on Shella Watson. You can't just leave one. And, Amy Velasco, Paige Kohler, Lexi Fleming, they all kind of disappeared down the stretch for Bowling Green at times. Janaea Donahue went 1 for 9 from the field. It was just a tough performance by the guards at the end of the game because you rebounded. You out-rebounded Buffalo 35-32. You scored more points off turnovers. You scored more points in the paint. You led for 23 minutes of the game. You led for over half of it. Buffalo led for under 10 minutes. And you can't find a way to come out with the win. I mean, you outscored Buffalo 23-15 in the third quarter.
Yeah.
They took a 12-point advantage going in to the fourth quarter, I believe it was. So it was just a collapse by the entire Falcons team in that final 10 minutes.
Yeah, and there was a clear shift in that game, right? It was basically right out of the huddle in the fourth quarter. Buffalo just had, they had a snap of a finger. They had the change of a...
And Chella Watson hits back-to-back threes. And
the crowd got into it, and BG's crowd got out of it, and Fred went from being, showing confidence out there to... take all the stress and everything that he was showing towards the end of that game, and Buffalo went from shooting 40% from the field in the first 3 quarters of the game to shooting 63% from the field in the fourth quarter. So they just heated up. BG cooled down at the wrong time, and they got away from them.
And it's amazing how that sort of momentum can shift suddenly. I thought it was shocking. Amy Velasco only having 10 points. 0 for 3 from the perimeter. I mean, those just aren't stats you usually see from her. And sort of like we said, I mean, if you end this game after the third quarter, that's a 12-point win for the Falcons. But really just in the fourth quarter, I mean, you got to close down games. Sort of like what we saw with the men's team this season, struggling down the last 5-6 minute stretch.
Yeah.
Really a shame to see the women lose in that way.
Yeah, and I mean, the energy that the team was showing, Lexi Fleming had a stretch in the second quarter, I believe, where she had steal, made 3, and then that energy was just completely gone. Buffalo managed to take that out of the game, and credit to Becky Burke and the coaching job that she had in that game. It was pretty impressive for her.
And I want to bring up a point that, Tyler, I believe you mentioned just a second ago about the guards, because something that's been of note about Bowling Green all season is the fact that they are so guard heavy, starting 4 guards usually, and then with the only outlier being Porter. But the number one thing that I found crazy that, I mean, you bring up, the fact that the guards did well for those first 3 quarters, but the fact that Buffalo can just adjust their game plan and shut down your entire... It wasn't just one player. The entire offense felt stagnant. You meant the rebounds, that's a good point. They were able to get the ball back. They were able to get those second chance opportunities, and you still miss. This team has been built on a core of key seniors that knew they were playing in what was likely their last game if they don't win. And it's the fact that with Shamil, you have yet to win a MAC tournament game. You have yet to do all of this. It just felt like such a disappointment against a team that was beatable. Buffalo is a very good team, but they weren't some kryptonite to Bowling Green. They weren't, I mean, we'll get into this a little later. It wasn't like BG versus Akron was for the men's tournament. This was a beatable team, a team that you had played before, and they dominated for almost the entire game and just let the game get away from them.
And this is a team that was fully healthy, right? We've seen in past years, especially last year, the excuse was, we weren't quite healthy. Fleming wasn't there. Velasco's out at times. And, once we get healthy, we'll be there next year. And, I mean, the team was healthy, and they got on a hot streak there at the end of the season. And I think if there was any team that was going to upset the higher seed in this tournament, I think it was going to be Bowling Green, just based on how they played the last couple of weeks of the season. And the expectations were on them that they could potentially do that, and they just fell short there at the end.
And you talked, Chaz, about the guards. I did mention, too, the guards kind of disappeared late. I don't know if it was so much Buffalo shutting down everything as it was the mentality changing for Bowling Green. Yeah. I think, and they won't admit it, they let down their guard going into that fourth quarter just a little bit. They didn't come out with the same intensity of that huddle in the fourth quarter. We've seen this from multiple teams so far in this tournament. Most recently, we saw it for the women's championship game with Ball State. And, they take over that game late and end up winning that over Toledo. And Toledo admitted that, they didn't come out with the same intensity, the same communication in that fourth quarter. And you look at some of the statements by some of these Falcons after the game. Paige Kohler just said the team collapsed when Buffalo decided to go in the paint. They weren't able to stop the bleeding, and they weren't able to keep Buffalo from punching it in the paint. Just the interior of that defense collapsing late in the game. And then Fleming talking about that Buffalo went on a run, and they can't let them go on that run that deep because basketball is a game of runs, but Bowling Green never had their chance to make another run. There just wasn't any time for it. They let that happen too late in the game. Buffalo timed it well when Chella Watson did take over, and that was the end of it. It's a lot of situational things, I think. And you look at the roster, there's a lot of people on this, a lot of players on this roster that were here for the Fab Four. And to have that run after being knocked down in the tournament championship game just 3 years ago, and to have no tournament wins to show for it over the next 2 seasons.
Disappointing.
It's that's about the only word you can come up with it. It's just disappointing when you look at the talent on this roster. And I think there needs to be some soul searching in this offseason. I think something needs to change, whether it's some sort of culture shift or mentality shift, or something needs to be jump-started into this program to bring it back some conference tournament success.
And a lot of things are going to change regardless of whether it's a good change or a negative change. With Fleming leaving, Velasco leaving, it's going to be almost a completely new team. It's going to have to be. They're going to have to find transfers if they're going to want to compete next year in the window.
Or you're going to need people to really develop in that offseason and step up next year.
I think Donahue,
that's what I was going to say.
Donahue will definitely develop and she'll definitely be there. But, besides that, you could argue there isn't, a lot of valuable pieces that'll be in the starting lineup.
With Donahue, we've talked about it, that she will get better offensively. It's just, where is that ceiling offensively for her?
Consistency. It has to be consistency.
That's the question. Because she's not going to be one of your top 2 scorers, most likely. You're going to need to find, because it's going to be Paige Kohler leading the guards next year, but you're losing Velasco and Fleming. It's a tough situation.
That's the 2 leaders of the team, right?
Yeah. That's the heart and soul people. Heart and soul players right there.
And go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, sorry. It's funny you're talking about heart and soul. This is a team that's going to have to sort of rebuild its identity next season. You have to decide, are we going to be a physical team that's active in the paint? Are we going to be active from 3? I thought it was interesting. We were very inefficient from the 3-point line in this game, only going 6 for 18. Buffalo was much more efficient from the 3-point line. So, are we going to be a team that knocks down a lot of threes? Are we going to be a team that's physical? This is an opportunity to build an identity, and it's one that Coach Shamil really has to take seriously with, how are we going to structure this roster?
And I think that does bring into question a little bit. You guys can throw the flag on me right now, but do we start questioning Shamil a little bit with those decisions?
Well, I think the thing to say right now is I think it seems like the window has closed for him in terms of this era. We're going into a new era where he's going to have to change the identity. There was already, a built structure from the previous coach that left, and now he was coming in, and now he's going to have, you could look at it as an opportunity for him to build, like Kevin mentioned, his own identity for this team. And, I think he's going to have to look at it as rather a positive than a negative.
I do think in this era, it is kind of hard to say the window is closed in the transfer portal era. We'll get into it for men's basketball. But, spoiler alert, Akron wins the tournament championship again. And I bring that up because you look at that Akron team, they had 9 new players this year. And they repeated as champions after losing their best player and the best player in the conference after last season to the NBA draft. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that you could bring in a good transfer class and get back to some success, but the jury's still out on Shamil. He hasn't proved enough in the first 2 years to be solidified that you can say that he is for sure not on a hot seat going into next year. And I don't think next year is a prove it year for him by any means. I don't think it's a, win a championship or you're out year. But at some point you need to get some success. They have not had a year. He has one win against the top 4 teams in the MAC this year. He doesn't have a win against Buffalo, as you mentioned. 0 for 2 in the tournament against them. So he's been knocked out in both years. At some point, you need to get at least a win or two here in the tournament and build some sort of success with the program.
Yeah, well, I mean, they did have that big win against Toledo late at home, but
yeah, but that's you look at the top teams in the MAC. You split against Kent State, you split against Toledo, and you really should have swept against Toledo, but you blew a big lead in that one as well.
Yeah, that's true.
There's just there was a lot of wins on the table for this team that they kind of let pass them. I really do think it's fair to say this team underperformed this year when you look at some of the wins they had against an SEC team. You mentioned the Toledo win. They beat Kent State late in the season. They came into this tournament as arguably the hottest team in the conference. You look back at the NIU loss. What if they beat NIU at the end of the season? How does that change things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would just like to go back and hit on your transfer portal point because, for one thing, men's basketball is different than women's, and I would look at the success that Ball State has had this year, and I think that's kind of the model of where women's basketball is at, especially in the MAC right now. That was a team that has 4 seniors who have been there all 4 years. They've been at Ball State, and I think there's value to hold for that, and they did bring in
one of them's been there 3 years, I believe.
3 years.
I think Richard was there 3.
Well,
she transferred in.
Yeah, okay. Well, 3 years there. And then they had the addition of the couple of transfers. They had transfer from Michigan, transfer from Texas A&M come in that provided that spark. But I think there is value to hold within having that chemistry, especially in the women's side of it.
No, I definitely agree with that. We'll see, though. He just needs to bring in a couple more bodies, though, because the way the roster's looking now. We'll see. It's going to take time for this all to shape out. Still very early on. You still have to wait and see, are there going to be any surprise portal entries from this team? You never know. There's always at least one player, I think, that usually enters the portal that you kind of scratch your head at. And, we're in the world of college basketball now where coaches are not only recruiting new players, they're having to re-recruit their own players.
Yeah.
Like right now, Fred Shamil is having to, make sure that all these players that are on the roster right now are going to stay here for next year and make his pitch as to this is the program, this is what we're building, this is why you stay, because any player can go, I don't want to be here anymore, I want to go to a more successful team, let's go to Ball State, let's go to Toledo, let's go to, the Big Ten, or try to make a run at somewhere like the Horizon League or something. You just never know in this era. It's so many question marks regarding the roster when you try to think of it, what it's going to look like next year.
There's a worst case scenario where Paige Kohler and Janaea Donahue could potentially be poached by a Power 4 conference team, and then what? After that, and then what?
Then you lose essentially your starting 5.
Well, yeah, so...
Yeah, that's the tough aspect. I mean, I think it's going to be tough. It's doable, but it's going to be difficult for Coach Shamil to make that pitch, because like we said, the team sort of did underperform, and it's easy to, like, in this age of the transfer portal, it's easy to say, like, I'm going to dip. So that's going to be, I think, his challenge is getting, some talent in the portal, but also making sure people stay, and that's going to be critical.
And it's especially hard to keep players and track new players when you can't find playoff success. And that's, at this age of college sports, that's all that really matters is your success in the playoffs. And if you struggle in the playoffs, like women's basketball has done the last 2 seasons, it's hard to keep the players that you have, and it's hard to attract new ones. And eventually, if you don't have any success in the playoffs, as a coach, you're going to be put on the hot seat. And so he's going to need to turn it around if he wants to keep his job here at BG and he wants to attract talent.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, college sports in general are becoming more and more like a professional league. So you have to look at what a lot of professional players do. Oh, I'm not winning with the team that originally drafted me. Okay, I'm going to go to a team that I have a better shot to get that playoff experience with, and that's going to be similar to how players are going to look at recruitment, right? You'd be more likely to go to a team, the powerful conference that is likely to make the NCAA tournament than you are to stay at a team that, maybe can make the conference tournament but can't really get out of it. So, and there's a lot less incentive for coaches to, be able to keep their players besides, their reliance on that point.
Well, I think that's essentially the biggest struggle that the group, I don't even know what you call it, the lower league teams have versus, the Big Ten, the SEC.
The group of five versus the Power Five split there.
That's only football, though. That's why I didn't want to say group of five.
It's still a thing.
They're still, Brady Sallee had a whole thing in the press conference. Of course, Ball State's head coach. Congratulations to him, by the way. His first conference tournament championship in 21 years of coaching. Long deserved for him. He's an incredible coach. He had to be a 5+ minute rant about how, basically your point there, Chaz, about how, there needs to be less weight given to these big conferences and more weight given to these small ones at some point. But you do also have to look at it. There is a talent difference. There is a recruiting difference. If you look at the amount of talent on some of these Power 5 teams, like let's look at Robin Fralick, for example. Bowling Green has the most tournament championships in MAC history. They are the most prestigious women's basketball school in the Mid-American Conference's history. And you look at Michigan State. Compare the two rosters talent-wise.
Yeah.
Like, we can say it is due to football, but there also just is a natural talent difference between these Power 5 and these Group of 5 most of the time.
Yeah.
There are some outliers. But for the majority, the bigger schools usually get the better recruiting.
And I think that's also, you've got more money in those bigger schools, the Michigan States, all of the Big Ten, SEC, they get more money. They have better facilities. They can, just fundamentally, they can recruit better. And I think you're right, Tyler. It still exists, 100%. And football's just become NFL junior in college. Let's be very honest. And with basketball,
yeah, at this point, I think college football is almost a semi-pro league.
Oh yeah,
it's more than it's a pro league. I don't even think you can call it a semi-pro league.
There's some teams like Kent State this year that yes.
I
don't think we can call that team a pro team.
But to be fair, they do have a salary cap and essentially make trades. So
throwing shade at Kent State out of nowhere.
I just pulled out an example because there still are. Yeah. They still are student athletes.
Yeah.
It's hard to call, to put that weight on them, but you're kind of right. I think it's turning into all college athletics. I think if you look at basketball is the next one up with all of this transfer money. You can question who's going to be next. Is it going to be volleyball? Is it going to be baseball, softball? But, you start looking at these college players. Look at the players in LSU. Look at Angel Reese. Look at Caitlin Clark. These players being thrown more money, way more money, than they're getting in the pro leagues. Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's just college athletics are completely different now than they were a decade ago, and I think we're at the point of no return, and it just murkies the water with basically everything you look at, especially with roster building, which was the original point of this whole discussion that we just went on. Is it's just so hard to predict what rosters are going to be next year and what development's going to be.
Yeah, I think a lot of that proof comes in like the levels that there is, right? A lot of the players that Bowling Green recruits that end up being successful are either players that are coming from smaller conferences and smaller schools that excelled at that level and want to take the step up, or they're players who maybe had trouble at the Power 4 conference level and need to take the step down. So it's a way to look at that in terms of divisions, conferences, as more of a tier, more of different tiers of players that play in these select conferences than it is rather teams.
And it is funny because now that we're sort of on this sidebar about like the state of college athletics, like my little piece on it is, the good old days where teams were held together by the power of friendship. That's kind of that's kind of over, sadly, because that was a beautiful aspect of college sports. Now it's where's the money, right? Like, and so it's a more cynical. It's like college sports have kind of grown up and gotten a 5 o'clock shadow where it's kind of grittier now. And so you're going to see over these next 5-10 years with college sports, and especially with BG sports, like as a mid-major school, the coaches who can think like a GM and who can think about roster construction, retaining talent, making that pitch. Like, there are going to be some coaches who are great at coaching in-game, but who don't know how to manage a roster, and those coaches are going to be lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
You have to be great at both, and we're going to see that develop within the next 4, 5, 6 years.
And I like that point, Kevin. I'm going to go back to one of your points, Henry, not to try to completely argue against it, but you use Ball State as the example, right, of building the program. I think it's a great model. I just don't know how, easy it is to replicate, to be able to keep four stars.
That's very true, yeah.
Because, if you think, let's go back to Bowling Green and use them as an example, that Fab 4 run, you'd include a player like Nyla Hampton in that core for the team. And then the next year she transfers to Ball State. It's Jocelyn Tate. You'd include her as a future part of that core of the team. She was going to be a core part moving forward with the next season when she took a jump in development, and she follows Freilich to go to Michigan State. Yeah. It's just so hard, especially at the mid-major level. You look on the men's side, Rashawn Agee, Marcus Hill, you go on and on and on with the amount of transfers that they've had. It's just so hard to keep players on the roster and keep a consistent group of players there year after year after year. Is it impossible? No. Teams have done it like Ball State. I think it just takes years of culture building. I think it would be hard for Shamil to establish that in year 2. You look at Salih, he's in his 13th year, I believe, over at Ball State. So it took him time to build it to a point where the program could be at that level. It just doesn't happen overnight. That's why it's so hard to do. If it was easy, every team in the MAC would be retaining all their players and making deep runs in the tournament every year, but it's just not like that.
And it's only going to get worse. Right, especially
yeah,
especially in basketball. It's hard to imagine, especially in football, that it can get more players can earn more money than what Bryce Underwood making $8 million as a freshman. It's hard to imagine that there's more than that. But it's
I keep using this. I think I've said it a few times on here. Scott Loeffler, who is now the quarterbacks coach with the Eagles, former BG football head coach. I love what he used in one of his press conferences when he talked about the state of college football, but it also pertains to college athletics as a whole, that we are flying a plane at 40,000 feet while trying to build an engine at the same time.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. You don't really know what's going on. You're just kind of diving.
You just got to run with it because nobody knows what tomorrow will hold with college athletics. Nobody knows where it's heading. That's all in the gray area. I don't think if you honestly asked any commissioner, including John Steinbrecher today, if you went up to him and asked him where are college athletics going to be in 5 years, I think they'd be lying if they told you they knew exactly.
Yeah, well,
I think it's different than if you went 10 years ago. Yeah. I think they could give you a pretty solid answer.
Yeah, well, I think you look at players, right, and the players aren't exactly the ones to blame. The players are just taking advantage of the system. And you look at the old argument, 5-10 years back was like, oh, we need to pay the players. The players do so much for these universities. They put their careers on the line, to play for these universities, and they don't get anything out of it, And then the NCAA realized, okay, well, people are framing this like it's going to be negative for us, but why don't we take this in a way that's going to be positive for us and just completely run with it? And they've just completely blown it out of proportion in terms of the money that they've started to make from it. And, it's going to get to the point where it seems like it's got to boil over at some point, and there's going to be some consequences that they face.
That's a really good point. I really do like that take of it's not like the players are like some villains for using the system. It's the system that's given to them. And at the end of the day, these athletes are, almost all of them are set on being the best version of themselves that they can be in the sport. If that means going pro, if that means winning conference awards, all of that stuff, they need to be in the spot to win best. And quite frankly, a mid-major for basketball, a group of 5 for football, is not going to win a national championship.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So you've got to upgrade yourself. And if you end up getting more money in the process, which they usually always do, from going from a group of 5 to a power 5 or power 4, 100% you have to make that move. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
And it's becoming, we've heard that argument about Nick Saban becoming the college football commissioner and creating his own league of SEC schools and Big Ten schools, and then that's the next level, right? That's what could end up happening.
Well, here's the honest truth: is that the NCAA commissioner has no power or control over anything right now. It's
a wild, wild west.
Yeah, it's really, if we're gonna be honest about it, the SEC commissioner and the Big Ten commissioner control all of college athletics. At this point right now, whatever they want to do kind of dictates where the dominoes fall for the rest of college sports. I mean, you look at the realignment that happens in the Big Ten and the SEC, and now the ACC is forced to pony up more money because Clemson and blanking, I think it was Florida State.
Yeah.
You see, look what they're doing over there. Do the same for us. Pac-12 isn't able to adapt; they die, and we'll see if they can come back. It's all craziness right now, and I can't wait for the documentary to come out in about 10 years, because the day that the name, image, and likeness bill was passed is the day that college athletics changed forever, and we'll find out whether it was for the good or for the bad. That's still out for the jury.
And you could call me sort of pessimistic, but what makes me nervous is every time in any industry, I feel like every time there's a title shift like this, somebody gets left behind and something, sort of gets screwed out of the deal. And I'm worried that mid-major schools like ours are sort of going to get lost in the shuffle, because kind of going back to what Chaz said, if you're getting more money to go to a school where you're going to be in a better position to win, that sucks all the talent away from mid-major schools, MAC, Missouri Valley Conference, like all these conferences. So that just concerns me, where in 10, 15 years, is there going to be any talent left at the mid-major level, or is it all going to be transferred out?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to look at drafts. I think there should be a comparison between drafts, especially maybe like NFL, NBA drafts from players from Power 4 conferences versus Group of 5 conferences and FCS conferences compared to now. And I feel like you'll definitely find a discrepancy, and that discrepancy is only going to get worse. But, I mean, back to Tyler's point, that point of where SEC commissioners and the Big Ten commissioner hold all that power, what keeps them from creating and funneling all the money towards themselves if they hold all that power? Absolutely nothing holds them from doing that, and that is a huge problem. It just is.
And going off of that, just to reiterate how much power like the Big Ten SEC has over college athletics, with the new college football playoff format, we already saw a lot of SEC schools were upset that they were not included. Whether or not they should have or should not have earned the spot is up to the jury. Most people, including me, would say that if you did not beat the teams you should have beat in your own conference, you should not be in the playoffs. But SEC commissioners then demanded that there should be at least 4 SEC teams in the playoffs every year. And the Big Ten, if that happens, Big Ten's almost certainly going to demand the same, which means that of the 12 spots available in college football, which is definitely the biggest of the college sports, that means that there will only be 4 left for all the other conferences. And keep in mind, there's still 2 other major conferences, so they'll definitely have at least a pick a year. So that leaves 2 for all the smaller conferences, which for conferences like the MAC, it's like, where do we fit in on that?
Yeah, and I think that really, to wrap this all up in a bow, there's too much chaos to really understand this entire landscape of college athletics. And going to a point Tyler said, I want to nip this in the bud really quick. That was the wrong turn of phrase. I think what really has been. Listen, I got a word of the day or a phrase of the day calendar, and that was my one for today. So
A for effort.
Thank you.
D for execution.
Wow, that was brutal. So I think the fact that we're seeing all these conferences realigning, we're seeing Oregon being part of the Big Ten, works great for football. Makes for you can start on your calendar, circle it. This game's going to be great. Makes no sense for any other sport that plays multiple times a week.
Yes. What about basketball? Think about how many times they have to travel west to east.
Just think about the Big Ten tournament for basketball. It's being held in Indianapolis, I believe, as it always is. Think about the amount of miles. Like, just think about Maryland for alone, who has been a member of the Big Ten for like a decade now. Think about how far Maryland has to travel for that.
That's pretty far. That was a topic when they got put. Think about how far that is from the MAC tournament.
And now think about USC and Oregon and UCLA, Washington. Like, it is so ridiculous. There's a reason that conferences were regional. The Mid-American Conference is in the middle of America, the Rust Belt of America. If you look at the population demographics, it's pretty much in the middle of that. Now we're gonna start, come on, UMass, come back into the conference because we lost one and have to add another one. It's getting to the point where it's getting ridiculous, but it's just part of, college athletics that I think we have to live with at this point because, like I mentioned earlier, I just don't think you can turn back. I think we're too far along with this whole thing that...
you can't go back.
No.
Yeah. Players are not allowed
NCAA has done this to themselves for better or for worse, and this is what we're going to live with for the future.
It's Pandora's box. Once you open it, you can't close it again.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the players that are making millions of dollars now, and if you just end NIL, they can't even get a tattoo. So, I mean, it's just one of those situations.
You end NIL, you're going to have holdouts from nearly every university in the country.
Yeah.
You're not going to have college sports to play.
It's absolutely a brutal world out there. And we mentioned, so kind of bringing this discussion back into the realm of women's basketball, we're going to wrap this up before we take a quick break. But in the MAC tournament, just a little bit of an update. You had Buffalo knocking off the Falcons. You two, Henry and Tyler, were there. And then Toledo got a pretty good margin of victory against the Chippewas. If you guys want to say something quick about that. Did you guys, Falcon Media Sports Network covered every single one of these games, right?
Yeah, for the fourth year in a row. We were there calling all 14 games, I believe it was, and producing video content, written content, social media content for all of the games. I know Henry can speak to this too. It was his first time up there in Cleveland, my third time. It's a tremendous opportunity for all of us here in this organization to be able to do that on an NBA arena up at Rocket Arena in Cleveland, Ohio, home of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and to get the experience in a 4-day environment, a tournament environment like that. It's also just a really fun time to be able to cover all of these teams that we have watched or covered throughout this season with our respective beats and our coverage of all these teams. And we'll get to it on the men's side too. All chalk on both sides, no upsets, but it was a very fun tournament, jam-packed with action, and just a fun time up there in Cleveland covering it. So appreciate anyone that tuned in or read or watched or listened to any of our content that we produced over the week. It's very appreciated. And if you haven't gotten the chance to, you can go over to bgfalconmedia.com. All of the game recaps, sidebars, additional stories from there are up. You can check out our individual social media accounts. You can go to the BG_FMSN Twitter X account, and you can head over to the BG Falcon Media YouTube channel. You'll find the highlight videos, press conferences, and the broadcast over there.
And I really got to commend you guys because it's 4 days of nonstop work, nonstop effort. Tyler and Henry, both of you can answer this question. How much did you even sleep in those 4 days?
I plead the fifth. I will not answer that question live on air.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, not much.
Yeah.
But I mean, the main story of this, you asked, topics about the women's tournament. The main story for me was just how dominant Ball State was in the tournament. I mean, read out. I see you have the scores up. Read out the scores for the games that Ball State played.
Okay, so Ball State on Wednesday in the first game. They took down Western Michigan 82-53. Then on Friday the 14th, they got a day off. They smoked Kent State 70-53. Yeah. And then in the final game on Saturday, on Saturday against Toledo, they won. They don't have the score here.
65-58.
Yeah.
So even then, big margin of victory there as well. Just unreal, the run that Ball State had. And you mentioned it, Tyler. All chalk. Not a single upset. It was just unreal to see Ball State. They looked like the team that was going to get it done from start to finish.
Well, I mean, this is something I think we've all known, too. This was on the women's and men's side as well this year. There wasn't much parity in the conferences this year. There was parity in the middle section, I would say, from teams 5 to 8. But the first 4 on each side were pretty well set and defined of who the best 4 teams on each side of the conference were this year. And that showed in the tournament. I haven't looked to see, because I haven't had time, to see if there's ever been a Mid-American Conference basketball tournament where every higher seed won. I would think there's got to be at least one other one, but this is probably one of the few times, if the only time, that this has ever happened in this tournament. And it didn't keep us away from good basketball games. A lot of these semifinal and final matchups were very competitive and exciting to watch and cover.
Yeah, especially on the men's side. I know the both semifinal matches were great, and the final between Miami, Ohio, and Akron, which we'll get to in a little bit, was an all-timer.
Everything you could ask for in a championship.
Storyline, scoring, everything in that game was unreal. But you're
right. We won't foreshadow all of that. You'll have to stay here and listen for us to break down of that in our next segment,
which we're going to get to in just a second. So before we sign off for just a second, go to a quick break, we do have the I was going to call it annual, but we don't do it yearly, the trivia question we do every single week. This week, this one's a little bit simpler than most, but I want to say, if you take all of the teams in the Mid-American Conference, we're going to throw UMass in there as well, which team needs is most in desperate need of a logo redesign? If you had to completely change up their logo, any of the MAC teams are available here. Which one just needs to be shaken up?
Western Michigan.
Well, not yet.
Oh, sorry.
we're gonna go to a quick break, and then you're gonna.
I have a feeling I know what one of these are gonna be.
Sorry, I was very aggressive there.
We'll go to a quick break, and then we'll flesh things out. So without further ado, we'll go to a break. You are listening to the Zig Zone right here on WBGU 88.1 FM.
BGSU graduate Jason Jackson from the Miami Heat here. Make sure to tune into the Zig Zone every Sunday at 4 p.m. on WBGU 88.1 FM, home of the Falcon Media Sports Network.
Hey, it's Reese Patricus, and you're listening to WBGU 88.1 FM, home of the Falcon Media Sports Network.
Look at that. Just like that, we are back on the air. Kevin, you were just kicking your feet ready to get right into this one.
Oh, man.
Which logo needs the biggest redesign?
What are we going to pick?
Western Michigan, their logo makes me angry. Like, no hate. I'm sure Western Michigan is full of great people, even though Michigan is the dark side with the Wolverines and all. But I just, the brown and yellow combination does it for me, but just the logo looks old. Like, they could make the horse scarier.
Are you talking about the horse logo, or are you talking about, like, the Washington Commanders looking like the W logo in the maroon
W
circle?
in the circle?
No, I'm talking about. Wait, we're talking about Mac.
So I got some bad news for you. They made their logo even worse.
Oh no, they made it a W.
Yeah, their logo's gotten even worse. If you thought the Bronco was bad,
they have two logos. The Bronco is one of them.
I thought the Bronco was the primary one.
I think it is, but they use them They use them both all the time.
Oh,
they do use them both.
Looks like a D3 logo.
Yeah,
looks like Wash.
Yeah,
Wash a little bit.
Not great.
Very similar logo.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it's not great. But I will say it fits the Western Michigan grit at the end of the day.
What narrative is that? I've never heard that narrative in my life.
If you show me all of the athletic performances, all of the teams from Western Michigan, based on how they play, and they said, put a logo to this team, it would be that.
For one of the highest
circle with a W.
in the MAC.
I mean, okay.
Wait, what was that, Tyler?
For one of the highest athletic budgets in the MAC, we're going to act like they have the most grit out of any team in the MAC. That's funny.
I'm saying in the sense of like, it's a logo you just don't like. It just bugs you in a way that I can't explain why I don't like it, but I just don't feel like it's great. And you know what?
It doesn't pass the Chaz vibe.
Exactly. Not many things pass the Chaz vibe, which we'll get into in a second. But Tyler, you were also very excited. What's yours?
Mine's a little different. I can't go with just one. I'm going with the entire state of Michigan. I think all three of the logos just suck. If I were to be honest, I look at Western. I agree. I think the Broncos old, outdated. I think the W looks like either Walsh or the Washington Commanders. Eastern Michigan's just a big E.
With a TM on it, by the way.
Just the most boring thing you could ever come up with. You are the Eagles. Come up with something different. I love their logo on the baseball hats, the script E for baseball. Yeah. Go to that, please. It's tremendous. And then Central might be the worst one out of all of them. It is quite literally a C with like 3 lines in it to the left side. Like, what is that?
It's a C that's moving. Duh.
But like, it's the Chippewas.
Hey, Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown came out of Central, so
he might have designed the logo too.
You're saying it's that bad?
I'm saying it's that bad. I think it's just. I think all 3 of those teams could do so much better. I just think like. Look at some of the other logos around the league. Ball State's Cardinals, awesome. The NIU Huskies, pretty cool. BG's is newly renovated.
You can't say NIU for the MAC anymore, Tyler.
No, they're still in the MAC.
If we were doing a Horizon League rank, maybe.
Wait till UMass gets here, and we'll have them included in this conversation. Like the Bull's awesome.
Yeah, the Buffalo Bull goes hard.
That's what I was gonna say.
Like, come up with something like that. I love when teams use the mascots as the logo too. Mm-hmm. Like, give me a Freddie Falcon and a Frida Falcon logo. But when you just use an E or a C or a W. It's like a compass. We're going north, east, west, and south. Like, come up with something a little creative, please.
And I want to build off that.
And also, are any of those 3 recognizable if you go on the streets in New York City? Is someone going to recognize that and go, yeah, I know what that E stands for? Because they're almost acting like they are the Power 5 schools of Ohio State where you can wear the O and everyone knows, or the Cincinnati Bearcat, and we know what that means. Like, it's just a big E. Like, change it.
Well, and I think, that's a good point. The Ohio State logo is different because it's like so completely
Everyone
different.
knows what the Ohio State logo is.
The E for Eastern Michigan is literally a Comic Sans E painted green. Like, that's all it is. And you mentioned Cincinnati. They've got the claws on top. At least it's got something, and it looks kind of like weird. The Central Michigan one, I kind of disagree because it's a little different, which leads me into mine.
And it's just as boring.
Oh my gosh. But it does lead me into mine. Akron's is horrendous. If you're talking about just a letter, the Akron Zips and their mascot is Zippy Roo, a kangaroo, and your logo's
wrong.
An A.
You are wrong, Jess. Zippy is the best mascot in the MAC.
No. I agree, and I'm saying
but don't bring him into it.
Well,
he's
her.
part of the logo.
It's her.
Oh, sorry.
Zippy is her.
I'm sorry.
You're talking about Zippy. You don't even know anything.
We
about
talked
Zippy.
about this like 2 hours
Zippy
ago.
needs to be on the logo.
Well, here, I'll say this. I think
true.
their old logo is way better. I think the A is boring. If you guys remember the Z with the dashes all throughout it, like the very aggressive Z that had all like the Fear the Roo stuff on it and all that, that's tremendous. You want to see a good logo, look up the Fear the Roo for Akron. That has Zippy in it.
The Fear the Roo?
Fear the Roo. Look that up. That has Zippy as a logo in it.
Hang on, I'm getting there.
You got to type faster here. We don't have that much share time.
Oh, that's tough.
Ooh.
Yeah, you want a logo. That's a good logo.
Oh, that is hard, actually. And you know what? It would be a lot cooler if the primary logo was just Zippy just mean mugging me.
I'm down for it.
Yeah, for real.
I'm down for it.
Yeah.
Call us Akron. We have some tips for you.
Yeah,
that does go hard.
11 years ago, man. Tyler, you were what, 8?
Grew up in a household. Dad graduated from Akron. I've seen that logo my entire life.
Okay.
That's a good point. So yeah, we got 2 left. We're running low on time.
I'll
here.
hop in next just because I had 2, and both of them have been stolen from me, but it's okay. I still have a good rant about Akron. Originally, I was going to go Eastern Michigan with Tyler. He had his bit on that, and that's because Chad said I don't have much to say. It's just a Comic Sans Z. But Akron, as you guys said, they have the A now. They also have the Z, and unlike you guys, I also hate the Z logo. I have friends who go to Akron, but it's the same thing where it's like, you have just a Z. If you go to people who are outside the MAC, who don't know MAC schools, they're not going to know what that is. They're not going to know Amelia.
I'm going to defend the Z just a little bit. I like how edgy and aggressive it is. It's got some, like Jazz would say, grit to it. It feels like it has some character to the logo. Like the current A, I think, is almost as bland as the Comic Sans E. It is just, like if I took a protractor and just copied a straight line on the bottom of it and then, try to round something here and make us another straight line there. Just, I don't know. It seems so just too modern.
But that Z's been around the blocks a little bit. That Z's more gritty.
Yeah, but I don't know. Obviously, again, I have friends at Akron. Hi, Rob. He's probably not listening, but I don't know. Just he is always people from Akron are always hyping up their logos. And back in the day when I had the Fear of the Root, I understood it because that's a cool logo. But
it's still kind of hanging on there. They use it once in a while. It's almost dead. It's still around though. It's almost dead. It's not dead.
It's on life support.
It is on life support.
They haven't quite pulled the plug.
Not just yet.
But the A and the Z, they're just letters. And I'm among the boat where it's like, if you have a mascot, which all teams other than the Washington football team for a while, almost every single team in the NFL and college hockey, in college in general, and any sport in America has a mascot. You should include your mascot within your logo. So to just have it just
Stanford.
be an A or just use a Z, it's like you can do better. Hire someone to include a kangaroo within the A somewhere. You can find a way.
I'm down for it.
Yeah, I am too. Turn the A into a kangaroo pouch with a kangaroo on top. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, mine.
That's a take.
It is a take of all time.
I would probably go with the Miami logo just because it's similarly to Akron. I think Miami is probably one of the more recognizable, probably the most recognizable letter logo, even though it is just a block red M. And I'm not a big fan of the Red Hawk mascot. We saw it at the MAC tournament, and it didn't really excite me much. It's just kind of
Zippy.
It just kind of looks like a guy
always
dressed up as a Red Hawk more than it is a mascot. And I'm just not a big fan of it. And if we're including saying block letters are not a good logo, which I agree with, I think Miami just has to be included in that category.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Miami hasn't gotten enough hate. The Red Hawk is a sick mascot too. We just need more mascot inclusion. We also, might I add, our resident hockey beat Ben Korak quick texted me and he said horrible take about Western, Eastern, and Central. He loves all of those.
Well, that's
logos.
also from a Michigander.
Yeah.
So,
There's definitely bias.
A tad bit of bias
That
there.
take is not valid coming from a Michigander.
I'm also defending the Fear of the Rue logo, and I am quite literally from Akron, so there's probably also bias to call me out on that one too.
Yeah, you know what, Tyler? It's okay because we all have a little bias every now and then. Speaking of bias,
Some of us admit it, some of us don't.
And exactly, and that, speaking of bias, we try to cover the MAC tournament as what's the word I'm looking for? Objectively as possible, as impartially as possible. But how are you feeling, Tyler, after that men's basketball loss to Akron?
I'm gonna be quite honest. I can't say I didn't expect anything better than it. Did I expect him to lose by 29 and the second largest defeat under Todd Simon? No. Did I expect them to beat Akron? Also no. And I think that's a good lead-in to the MAC tournament the MAC tournament on the men's side. That was kind of the tone setter for the tournament. The first game of the day of the quarterfinals for the men's side. And it was Akron's tournament all the way. They averaged 98 points per game. The first 2 games, ended up winning the championship. We'll get into that. But for this Bowling Green team, you can check out the story I wrote about the team after the game on bgfalconmedia.com. But the gas was just empty. The gas tank was empty. There wasn't anything left. You look at what this team's been through. A lot of people don't bring it up. Elijah Dem never stepped foot on campus with the team for a game or a practice after he tragically has 4 family members die in a house fire in Vegas a couple days before the season begins. I believe it was the day after Hoops Night. That's not really brought up that much. That's definitely something that affected this team early on mentally. And, you lose 3 starters throughout the season to injuries. You lose Yusef Kayat and Sam Towns to lower body injuries. You actually lose all 3 of them, including Trey Thomas, to lower body injuries. That's just horrible for this team. They just were never able to overcome that fully. And you run on a 7-man rotation in the MAC tournament against the best scoring offense in the MAC and a team that was tied for the best conference record in MAC history. And you're running a 7-man rotation against that team with the best coach in the MAC on the other side. It was a Herculean task for this Bowling Green team to try to overcome, and ultimately they did not. They just didn't have enough left in it to overcome it. It's just a tough way for the season to end. It's kind of a picture of what the season was. I think it's an incredible achievement by Todd Simon and his coaching staff to be able to will that team into the conference tournament. I came on these airwaves and said the season was dead after the Central Michigan loss. I thought they were done there. They were 2-7 in conference play, and I didn't think they had the wins left to make it up. And they won 7 of the last 10, 4 of the last 5, the last 4 road matchups, and they got a little bit of help from NIU, and they snuck into the MAC tournament, which I think is incredible. Todd Simon now has gotten to every conference tournament every season that he's been a head coach. An incredible achievement for him. Of course, they don't reach the success they had last year with a 20-win season and a conference tournament win. Not winning the whole thing, of course, but a game won in the tournament. And unlike women's basketball, who I think will probably get an invite into one of the postseason tournaments, most likely the WNIT, I think is probably how it's going to shape up to be. I don't see this men's team getting an invite to a postseason tournament. I don't know if they'd even take it, to be quite honest, with the health of the team. I'm not sure they would want to go that route. But I think it was incredible that they got there. It's a tough way to end, but Akron is a powerhouse.
And I completely agree with you on that side. I mean, a lot of the qualms we mentioned in that first hour about Coach Shamil was the fact that he had everything really going for him and was not really able. The excuses weren't as much on the table. Now, obviously you don't want to use the word excuse when you're talking about like a coach and a team, but I will say this. There was so much adversity for Coach Simon. You mentioned it, you saying that the season was over, and I mean, everybody felt the same way. I think you were one of the last people to really throw in the towel on the season, quite honestly, and a lot of us were just really waiting to see what was going to happen, what Simon was going to do to adjust. I mean, it looked like the year had been blown up, essentially. You make the MAC tournament, and yes, you get smoked by Akron, a team that will end up winning it all, and they're a very strong mid-major team, one of the best mid-majors, you could argue. You got to be excited for what Simon was able to do. His vision that he started last year of building this team was dashed almost the second, or you could say even like right before conference play had even started, with the injuries, all of this stuff they had going on. And then the season goes on, you end up having some late losses like Trey Thomas. There was so much for this team, and then at the end it just all starts clicking.
I'd even bring up the other injuries. You have Javante Campbell, who this is just pure craziness, and you want to talk about grit. Javante Campbell is an absolute warrior. This guy breaks his hand in the second conference game of the year Around January 7th is when he broke his right hand, his dominant hand that he shoots and dribbles with. He wears a brace on it, and he plays all throughout conference play with that injury. Then 2 weeks ago, against Ball State, he breaks his left hand. As his right hand is still broken, he scores over 20 points in that game, continues to play this season, doesn't miss one conference game, only comes off the bench once when they needed scoring off of the bench. I think it was 5 straight 20-point games at one point for him with a broken hand, and then by the end of it, he had 2 broken hands. You don't hear him complain once about it. You don't hear anything bad about it. He doesn't practice once since he breaks his right hand. He sits out and practices, and I've seen this firsthand. He will just sit there with Todd Simon, talking to Simon, or sit on the bench with coaches, talk to the coaches. They run him through walkthroughs, that's it. And they put him out there and expect him to play the level that he did the entire season without having a full practice on the team. It's incredible. And he mentioned that Todd Simon, he thinks, is the only coach in the country that would allow him to do what he did with not practicing but play every game this season, which, shout out to Simon for how he managed that by figuring out, that the injury was not going to be able to get worse and letting his guy play. And then you have Jemai Felt coming off back-to-back seasons with torn ACLs. Tremendous job this year. He wears multiple braces, including a huge shoulder brace all year. Todd Simon talks about how he's dealing with 500 other injuries. None of them were ever specified to us, but 500 other injuries is what Simon used. So he's another warrior that battled through all that this season. But Simon talked about it. They had to fully reinvent themselves after that Central Michigan loss, and they did.
Yeah, and you talk about, those are the kind of guys in a locker room where you'll go to, the rest of the team would go to war for those guys. And that's just a beautiful thing to have for morale, battling through adversity. And that's just the kind of toughness where you love to see that. We just had the conversation in the last hour about, NIL, transfer portal, and how you can just up and leave. It's great to see a group of guys commit to the culture, commit to what they're doing, and stick with it for the entire season. Obviously, you wish this loss against Akron would have been closer at least, but it's still just amazing what they accomplished and how they lasted through so much difficulty.
Yeah, and people are going to bring up moral victories for the team if they could have competed against Akron. They already did that one time this year, down two starters. I think the moral victory for the team this year was getting to the tournament. Yeah, that's something that seemed impossible at one point this season. I know I said the season was dead. I don't think anybody in here would honestly say that they thought the team had a shot after the Central Michigan loss, starting 2-7. It was the bleakest outlook you could have imagined, and they went on an incredible run and made it. It's just and that was kind of the story of the tournament, though, was Akron. They dominated for the second year in a row. Chaz, you'll get into the results here. But as I'm kind of, it's kind of insane what John Gross has done over there.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because you lose Enrique Freeman, the MAC Player of the Year, and he goes to the NBA, and the team gets better the next year. That is incredible for John Gross to build. The culture that he has built at Akron. He now has 5 MAC tournament championships, 3 at Akron, 2 at Ohio, 3 tournament championships in the past 4 years, back-to-back tournament championships. He's a multiple-time MAC Coach of the Year. He's got a couple regular season titles. The guy has done everything at Akron, and now he's taking them dancing for a second year in a row. He's going to get a lot of looks by Power 5 teams. We'll see if he stays at Akron another year or if he takes another opportunity, a former Illinois head coach. But incredible what Akron has built over there in Northeast Ohio.
And I remember a quote that Todd had, I believe it was in that press conference in the loss to Akron, is they have such a deep lineup that Todd said even the bottom 5 rotational pieces that aren't in the starting lineup would be one of the best teams in the MAC, which I believe. I genuinely believe that would be true. That's not an over-exaggeration.
I got a crazy one for you if you want to put into perspective how good Akron's bench is this year. buckle up for this. Akron has the 5th most bench points in the country.
How about that?
5th most bench points per game in the country.
Oh, my gosh.
34.4 points per game from Akron come off the bench.
And, I mean, we saw...
They played 10 deep
Yeah.
every single game. I forget the number of how many people scored in the championship. I know in the quarterfinal and semifinal round that 9 of their 10 players who played scored in double digits, and the only player that did not score in double digits. 9 of their 10 players that played scored any amount of points, and the only player that didn't was Musim Kamali, and he played like 5 minutes each game, which it's just insane.
I mean, you could look at this team, right? Akron, and talk about taking it personal for John Gross. He got fired from Illinois. I believe it was just underperformance, and then just talk about taking it personal. 2 championships at Ohio and 3 at Akron, and just making it happen. But I mean, it's unbelievable for him and these players. I kind of forgot my point that I was going to make, so you guys can chime back in here, and I'll get back into it. But
so, well, until you figure out where you're going there. Oh, Henry,
It'll hit him right after we go off the air here today.
Yeah, right as we change the subject.
I was going to say, let's jump into it's way too exciting to ignore. This MAC tournament for men's basketball was absolutely unreal. You mentioned it was all chalk yet again, but a lot of very good matchups. You got Western Michigan versus Kent State in the first round, 73-66. That was a close one. Ohio-Toledo going into overtime. That was a heart stopper.
That was an amazing game, and I think Miami-Eastern Michigan's right up there with it. Eastern Michigan giving Miami a run for their money early on was amazing to see.
Oh, yeah, and then Miami immediately kind of taking that right on the shoulder, blowing past Kent State, and then Akron putting a century on Toledo. That was also crazy.
5 times Akron has scored 100 points this season. Also a ridiculous number. The Akron-Toledo game was a barn burner. Miami-Kent State was great. And I think a lot of people thought, based on those results, that Akron averaging 98 points a game in the tournament was going to blow by Miami. It's not what we got, though.
No, you're right about that, Tyler. You were there. You saw the action up close. I'm just going to say the score, and you tell me how it happened, and you tell me why those stakes were so high, as Akron snuck by the Red Hawks 76-64.
So I'm going to set it up before going into the game by talking about the matchup between the coaches. John Gross over for Akron, Travis Steele for Miami. A brother-brother matchup. They are actually half-brothers. They share the same mother, so add on to it, Akron eliminated Miami from last year's MAC tournament, so it was kind of a rematch for them. Family reunion's going to be a little interesting this year between the two of them. Thanksgiving dinner might be a little odd, but just a tremendous storyline going into the game. And, yeah, it was everything you could ask for in a tournament championship game. Akron had been lights out shooting. Their first 10 shots, by the way, in the quarterfinal game against Bowling Green were 3-pointers. They didn't take a 2-point attempt against Bowling Green, I think, until like 8 minutes into the game. And they had been red hot in the quarterfinal and semifinal round. They came out ice cold. I think they started 0 for 6 or 0 for 7 from deep. They couldn't hit a shot to save their life. Miami was red hot early. 18-point lead the Red Hawks built at 1 point. But you can never count out a John Gross team. They started battling back, chipping away. They eventually erased that 18-point lead, I think within the final minute, right around there. And then it was another John Gross coaching masterclass. Travis Steele, by the final minute, I know I heard some of our other members that were down there on the floor saying that they charged a timeout to Miami that they didn't want charged. Either way, Travis Steele runs out of timeouts with a minute to go. He's unable to stop the clock. They're still leading at this point. John Gross completes an 18-point comeback and wins the game while having 2 timeouts to spare by the time the buzzer sounds. That is insane to think about. I don't think I have ever seen a comeback that large, especially in college basketball, where a coach still has 2 timeouts that he never uses. You go to the final possession, Evan Ipsaro for Miami. They are tied at this point. It is 74-74. Evan Ipsaro for Miami drives inside and attempts like a fadeaway, kind of like imagine what LeBron did to the Raptors, that fadeaway off the right hand. He kind of did that on the other side of the basket, same side of the court. LeBron did that to Toronto, by the way, and tried to bank it off, was nowhere near close. And it's so interesting that he took the shot because Peter Suter was red hot here in this game. He was dominant for Miami. He scored 24 points, made 6 3-pointers. I want to say he missed his last 3 shots from the field, though. He cooled down. But to not give him the ball on the final real possession for Miami is crazy to me. And then you have, on the other end, Nate Johnson takes the ball off a tremendous pass up the court from Amani Lyles. This is where this Akron team's just so well coached. Most teams at this point with about 10 seconds to go would take a timeout and reset. Let's draw up a play, right, to get the best possible look. Amani Lyles gets the rebound, immediately kicks it up past half court to Nate Johnson, who's already running. John Gross does not use a timeout. None of the players call a timeout. Nate Johnson works his way inside on a play that he was designed to crash the boards on. He keeps the ball, jump stop inside, fakes a shot, gets a clear path to the hoop, and gets a layup to go with a few seconds remaining. And then once again, it's Ipsaro taking the final shot, a half-court heave, which I don't even think, based on being there in person, he got the shot off in time with the half-court heave. That doesn't go. A wild sequence of events. Miami only has 5 free throws the entire game. Travis Steele was not happy with the officiating after that one. You can look at that, but in the end, I think it's hard to overlook the coaching by John Gross. I think he outclassed Travis Steele in Steele's first tournament championship game appearance here in the MAC. I think that was shown that one coach was extremely experienced in these situations and the other was kind of a greenhorn in them. And, you know, Peter Suter could definitely have been named MAC tournament MVP, and none of us would have batted an eye. But Nate Johnson proved why he is the reigning MAC Player of the Year, why he was named MAC Tournament MVP. He scores 22 points, makes 8 shots from the field, adds in 5 assists, and puts in a tremendous game for Akron, hits the game winner, and the Zips repeat as champions and go to the March Madness for the second straight year for the first time in program history.
And I mean, Akron has just been the team of destiny this season, top of the MAC for practically the entire season. Then they have one of the coolest, at least, okay, this is a non-sports term, but aura-wise, it is a really great run that they had. They had close games, they had blowouts, they had comebacks. I mean, everything you could ask for. And now, I would not be shocked if they take a game or 2 in March Madness.
I don't care who they're being. Yeah, I don't care who they're being matched up in first round. I'm putting Akron in the second round.
And I think they can get past the second round. That might be crazy.
That's a little bit of a hot take there.
I saw their current projection is Texas A&M right now, which that is a winnable game. We saw what this team can do when they make their shots. Obviously, right. One thing I wanted to say is you mentioned how great the coaching is, which is completely true, but also the trust that he puts in those players. In the first half, the team was shooting. You know, they're off shooting wise in the first half.
Yeah, they shot in the first half. For reference, Miami shot 54.5% from the field, 55.6% from deep. Akron shot 44.4% from the field, 18.2% on 3-pointers.
Yeah. Miami was red hot start of the first half, and I mean, it just seemed like a case of, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Tyler, but it just seemed like it was a case of they were missing shots. It seemed like they had a lot of open looks, especially
for Akron.
Yeah, for Akron.
Oh yeah, they just weren't hitting shots.
And John Gross trusted in that team that, okay, I don't really need to do much different. I just need to get these players to make their shots. They just need to warm up and get in that right mindset there.
And Miami led for 35 minutes of the game, by the way. Akron led for 2:41. Very reminiscent if you remember Bowling Green's game against Akron earlier this season. I think Akron led for less than 90 seconds in that, but they came away with a win. And they completed a big comeback, a double-digit point comeback. Very reminiscent the whole time I had in the back of my head of that one that I saw in person here at the Stroh Center, calling both of those games. They were very similar contests.
And that's what you see. That's what you see with the great teams, is the teams that can bounce back, you know, being down double digits. Like what the team that can come back from deficit like that, win in the fourth quarter, win in those crunch time situations. That's just the sign of a great team, and obviously that's why they're going dancing here in March.
And I mean, great MAC tournament as a whole. I think it was a really exciting watch, even though everything didn't really. There was no upsets, which is, Tyler, you mentioned it a while ago, is absolutely crazy. But now we go into. Now I think that does us for the winter sports, quite frankly. As
I do want to put out one thing, because I do want to give them another little bit of airtime here. We're going to get all the shine for being there covering the MAC tournament. I want to give a shout out to all the Falcon Media Sports Network members who board operated our broadcast, all 14 of our broadcasts. Nate Henners, Reese Patricus, Jack Schill, Jacob Carey, Ben Korak, Austin Roos. Few of those guys have been on the Zig Zone numerous times throughout this semester. Big shout out to all of them. We got time off school. We got excused absences to be away in Cleveland to have fun covering this all for the organization. Those guys did not get that same privilege that we did. They had to work around their schedule and dedicate their time for the organization to get us on air, to get our names out there. So couldn't have done this tournament of covering every single game the way we did for the fourth straight year without those guys back in the studio. So huge shout out to them.
100%. I totally agree with that, Tyler. And they also so willing to volunteer as well.
Yeah,
which has been a struggle in the past. But yeah, so winter sports closed out. Now we've got some spring sports brewing. And Henry, MAC softball play, conference play has started. The Falcons were the top of the conference for exactly one game. Walk us through what happened this past week.
They were undefeated for about 20, not even 24 hours there, but yeah, I mean,
it's better than nothing, right?
Right.
I mean, it's better than this team has been in past years, especially last year. And I've talked about a couple of times about the improvements of this team, and I think this game was a good culmination of all the things that have gone right for this team in this season. Maybe despite their 6-15 record after this game, but 11-3 victory on Friday in the MAC opener against Buffalo on the road. Taylor Barron had an unbelievable game in this, 3 for 4. She was also 3 for 4 on game 2, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Peyton Steffs was 2 for 3 in that game. Ashley Chevalier had a huge triple there late in that game that got this team over the top after Steffs and Chevalier specifically have had some struggles in tournament play leading to this game, and they completely put that behind them and moved forward and had a great game on Friday. And Scarlett Anderson has just been unbelievable for this team. We've seen some trouble, especially with some freshmen who have come in and had an adjustment to make, and we've seen Scarlett Anderson step up in that role of leadership in this pitching staff. She's down to a 3.42 ERA for her and 4.1 innings of 0 earned runs in this game. She also had 2 2/3 in game 3 against Buffalo that were scoreless, and her performances have just been huge for this team. The offense has already proved that they can score when need be. It proved with these 11 runs in this game, especially late, 5 in the 5th, 6 in the 3rd in this game. And yeah, I mean, this team won. Sure, they won 1 of 3, but it's a great start. And this team already going into the weekend series against Kent State coming up here, the MAC home opener that we'll be calling. I believe it will be Ben and a select member on game 1 on Friday, and then game 2 will be myself and Ben on that call. Make sure to check that out on those days. But those are going to be big games because the team could tie their total MAC win total from 2024 in those 2 games, and that's only the second series that they've played. So that could be a big deal just in terms of the improvement that this team has had for that. And then those last 2 games that I talked about on Saturday, game 1 was a 4-3 loss in 8 innings to Buffalo. Fantastic outing from Mackenzie Kravchik in that one, 7 1/3 innings, and then 1 earned run on the day for her. One thing I would say is I would have liked to see a different look there in the end. Obviously, Buffalo's performance from Olivia Russ, 8 innings on 3 earned runs and shutting down the Falcons late, although they did get a run in the 7th, kind of contradicts my point there. But Mackenzie Kravchik had a great outing, but as at-bats increase for all of these players, they get more looks and they get comfortable facing these hitters. So you want to, especially to increase your chances in these late innings, especially extra innings, you want to maybe give them a different look. And I think this would have been a good time to throw in Scarlett Anderson or throw in Olivia Roth in that spot and just maybe shake it up a little bit for these Buffalo hitters. And I think that would have helped them in the end. But they did fall on a walk-off from Buffalo, walk-off single. And that was game 1. Offense didn't have such a great game. There was obviously not 11 runs like they had on Friday, but Tara Barrett had another 3-for-4 game, like I mentioned, 6-for-8 in those 2 games. Peyton Stevens had another great game with 2 hits as well. Game 3 was a 10-6 loss. Buffalo had a great offensive game in that one, scoring 5 in a huge 3rd inning for them. That was Scarlett Anderson, who put up her 2 2/3 scoreless. But interestingly, she allowed all 6 runs, but 0 of them were earned. Did do a lot of walks, a lot of errors from the fielding positions there. Another loss, but good offensive performance again from BG, putting up 6. Katie Hutter had 2 hits. Chevalier had another great game with 2. Steffes had another great game, 7 hits across the 3 games for her. That's big shout out to a player that had a bit of a rough time hitting close to 200 after the conclusion of those 4 spring tournaments that they played away from home. Came back here in MAC play and showed up when it mattered, hitting those huge hits there. And Kenya Matthews, I forgot to mention, in game 1 had her 2nd home run of the year, which is big for the junior transfer from Lakeland College, who similarly to Steffes has came in, and she's been good on the power side, but has struggled with strikeouts, struggled with contact, and she also had another hit in game 3. So, some good things, some things to work on, obviously, but all things considered, I was impressed with the way they performed. They showed that they could have won all 3 games, considering if some things would have gone differently, but I'm excited for sure. The home opener is going to be on Tuesday against Green Bay, followed by MAC home opener on Friday. That's going to be some big games and a great chance to get a look at this new look team come out to Missouri Field.
Yeah, I'm excited about this team. I think this is a team that could have some surprises in store for us. This was a while ago. This was February 24th, but this team did take Oklahoma, who's, I believe, the reigning national champs, to the 8th inning, which was crazy. So, I think there are going to be days where this team has a very high ceiling, and I think it's just going to be really fun to see how, MAC play, how that pans out for us here.
It's going to be interesting to see not just how the team pans out this year, but how they grow under Michelle Gardner. Obviously, all the experience that she's had coaching for nearly 30 years, over 30 years at this point, and it's kind of a culmination coming back to a team that she coached back in the 90s and bringing the expertise back to the head coaching position here. We mentioned this team 1-1. They're sitting right in the middle, or 1-2. They're sitting right in the middle of the MAC standings right now, and they were predicted to finish last, almost 7 points below in terms of voting, the 10th place team. And I think I can say firmly that this team has a shot to definitely not be in that position at the end of the year.
I think you're 100% right about that. And we mentioned the stuff with Willie and how much success he had in his first year.
Yeah.
What's going on with Michelle Gardner should not be understated.
For sure.
The fact she is, quite frankly, resurrecting a program that was absolutely just not great last year.
For sure.
And the fact that they're sitting at 6 in the MAC right now, I personally think it's 6 spots in the MAC tournament, right? So, listen, they need a lot to go their way, but with how the offense is handling themselves, I think they could do it. If they somehow sneak into the MAC tournament, I would be just as, and I know that's a long shot, but I would be just as hopeful for the softball program as I feel many feel about hockey. If Michelle Gardner in her first year would be able to do something that big.
Yeah, even if they're in contention, that's just a huge deal for this team. And the power has been there for this team. Obviously, ninth in team batting average, 9th in team ERA, but 5th. I believe it was 5th going into the season. Slugging percentage down to 7th in that category, but the 5th most home runs in the MAC in this team. So the power is there, the contact is there, and I mean there are a lot of things to look for. Obviously, I mean Addie Martin coming off of her freshman year where she got injured 8 games into the season, didn't even get to play in conference play, and she's coming into the season to completely turned it around. Came back from her injured hand, and just she's been tearing it up. And Hannah Hunt has had a great season offensively. Obviously not fantastic weekend from her, but she'll be looking to bounce back this week. And it's been an all-around performance for this offensive side that has just shown significant improvement. Just keep in mind, okay, I'll say this right now. Team average right now for the team is 264. Team average. And all of 2024 was 228 for the team, which is about 25 points below the 10th place team in the MAC. So the improvements are there, and I mean the chemistry is there, and the team is definitely confident for sure.
And I mean, you got to love where softball is at right now. Obviously, they're not a top team in the MAC, but that's okay from where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to be proud of, but it is really hard to get a lot of those eyes on you when Bowling Green baseball is performing at the level that they are. The Falcons completed a 3-game series sweep against Akron. Absolutely massive out of them. They had their first Friday victory at Akron since 2014, over a decade ago, which is kind of unreal. And, I mean, you're putting all of these stats together. Tyler, I know you've got a lot of them as well. I mean, what Bowling Green is doing right now is completely unreal, and they are just dominating every single aspect that you could ask for.
There's something about the start of conference play that just gets this Bowling Green team going. For the second straight year, we can officially say it now, the Falcons are the last undefeated team in conference play in the Mid-American Conference. They have started 6-0. If you remember last year, they started conference play 7-0. The best start to conference play in MAC baseball history. They have an 8-game winning streak now, Chaz. When you think of that 17-game winning streak, there were some non-conference losses in between there. The 8-game winning streak currently is the longest since 2010.
Ridiculous. And, I mean, what's even crazier is, and we've mentioned this in both of our bullpen bulletins, it's just they're so consistent. The roster is so deep to the point where you've got Kyle Halleck trying to get all 3 catchers in a game because your bats can heat up just like that. It's ridiculous, the offensive efficiency that we're seeing out of this team. And the number one, I think the sight for sore eyes that I was really excited to be able to witness right now is Connor Penrod. He has proven to be a top-tier closer, not only in the MAC, but, I mean, honestly, in the country. He's been just unreal, winning games for the Falcons when those bats, if they get cold, doesn't matter. Your offense can continue to do what they want because Penrod is just shutting down opposing offenses.
And before we get into his numbers for this year, it's just great to see from the guy because he had a tough last year. 2 years ago, he had a 3 ERA. That was the best on the team in 2023. He went 4-0, tied for the most wins on the team. That was in 18 appearances. 30 innings pitched, had 40 strikeouts, 11 walks. He had a great season. Last year, not so much. He had a 7.92 ERA. He went 3-2 in 19 appearances, pitched 5 less innings than the year before at 25, 23 strikeouts, 24 walks. Just not good splits for any pitcher, especially a relief pitcher, but he has been lights out this season, Chaz. Has not allowed an earned run in 10 innings pitched. He's 1-0 with a team high, a career high, 5 saves. He's allowed just 7 hits in 10 innings, has not allowed a run unearned or earned. He has 19 strikeouts to 5 walks.
5 saves as well.
Oh, and I should add, he's only allowed 1 extra base hit in 10 innings. He has done a tremendous job at not letting batters square up anything. Opponents are hitting 184 against Penrod. He has been tremendous this season, and he's looking even better than the Penrod. We want to go back, we say go back to the old version of Penrod. He's looking better than the 2023 version that we saw. He's more dominant right now than he was at any single point during that 2023 season, in my opinion.
And that's really reassuring to see when you have a closer who's playing at such a high level. I mean, I liken it using my favorite sport, football. I mean, it's like having a really great field goal kicker who can win you those close games. having somebody functioning at that high of a level just really, it doesn't make you rest easy because there's no resting easy in sports, but it does ease your mind a little bit, especially going into, as we go further into MAC play, to have a closer who's playing at such a high level.
I agree with that too, and this team's needed someone to step up in that because they have used Jacob Turner, who was the primary closer last season. They've kind of used him as a quasi-starter. He's been a starter here or there, and he's still been a high-leverage arm, but they have not used him in closer scenarios. And you have some other guys like Owen Pohl who have tried to step up in those areas and just I don't think are fully ready for that just yet. But Penrod being back for this bullpen, which was the major weakness of the team last year, was the bullpen. It's great to see for Bowling Green, and they are firing on all cylinders right now, right around the time they did last season.
And I think the thing that's absolutely crazy for me is the fact that your 3 starters right now are all, at least on the mound, are all doing great. You've got DJ Newman, Nick Good, and now we saw Landon Williman had a very solid game today. But I want to go back to Penrod for a second. So he's seen action in the 5 games in a row that he's just had, has a save in each one of them. He's got a save in every game he's seen action in since since February 23rd. Since nearly a month. Every game he's seen action, he's had a save. What a ridiculous amount of numbers there. Great closer on his part. And I think what's made this team function so well is the fact that you can rely on Penrod to shut things down late. You can have good pitching early. Your bullpen can sustain in the middle, close with Penrod, and then your offense is so deep to the point where somebody is going to step up, no matter who it is. Brady Birchmeyer, absolute. That the last home run ball he hit might have hit the moon. I don't know if they've ever found it. This guy mashes the baseball. We've seen a great job by Garrett Wright getting on base reliably. If it's getting hit by a pitch, getting a base hit, anything, he can get on base. Sam Seidel starting to wake up now, going a little bit deeper into the season. Just great efficiency all around.
Brady Birchmeyer, I want to stick on him for a second. He's been phenomenal all season, and he's only heated up as of late. He has a home run in back-to-back games. He's driven in a run in 5 straight games. 14 RBIs in the past 5 games for Brady Birchmeyer. If you look at his season stats, Brady Birchmeyer this year is batting .358. He has 5 doubles, 5 homers, 26 runs batted in, a .657 slugging percentage. He's drawn 8 walks and struck out just 12 times, and he has a .421 on-base percentage. This is all coming after he batted .179 last season as a freshman. As a sophomore this year, Brady Birchmeyer has completely broken out in the best way possible for Bowling Green. And it's huge for them because the guy that we all thought would be the breakout player, or at least one of those breakout power bats, was TJ Tackett. We all expected him to be the big power bat in the middle of the lineup, with some of these guys like Tyler Ross and Jack Krause leaving, along with Nathan Archer after last season. And Tackett's, he's the one concern that I have for BG offensively right now. Because he just has not really got it going at any point this season. It's great that Brady Birchmeyer has stepped up, but if they could get them both hot at the same time, that would be great to see. Tackett did have a hit in every game against Ohio. He was 3 for 4, 1 for 4, 2 for 4. So he is starting to get going a little bit more. He's drawn a walk in 5 straight games, but if you look at his overall numbers this season, they've crept up a little bit. He's batting .298. That's not really the concerning part. He's always a high on-base guy, has a .469 on-base percentage, 13 walks to 9 strikeouts. We expect that from Brady Birchmeyer. It's the power has not been there.
Yep.
He has 2 extra base hits this season and 3 runs batted in. The 2 extra base hits are 2 doubles. All of that in 14 games started. His slugging percentage, Chaz, is just .340. It is... just don't exactly know exactly what's going on with Tackett. He just hasn't not squared the ball up much this season. you haven't seen a lot of loud contact from him. I don't know if it's something mechanically. I don't know if it's confidence-wise, but something's a little off with TJ Tackett's power-wise. Not really average or on-base-wise, but power-wise, TJ Tackett has not taken that step that we thought he would. Brady Birchmeier has.
And I think that was the thing last year as well, when we knew that there was going to be a lot of losses. You're losing a Tyler Ross, a Jack Krause, a Nathan Archer. These younger guys had to come in. They had to step up.
Halleck talked to it about both of us when we asked him about it preseason. He went that if the guys here on the roster that were here last year played at the same level that they did last season, we're not going to get to where we want to be at the end of last year. They all have to play better than they did last season.
And it came down to both Tackett's and Birchmeier. And I think if you both asked both of us, Tyler, 2 months ago, who we thought would be one of the bigger performers, arguably, I mean, the season's very young, but could be a first-team All-MAC guy between Tackett's and Birchmeier, we might have both said Tackett's. I don't know about
I would have said Tackett's.
Exactly. I would have said Tackett's.
To be honest, Brady kind of snuck under the radar for me.
Yeah.
Because we were so focused and enamored with the possibility of TJ Tackett's being a high on-base guy with a good average and being able to completely match the ball. And he just hasn't been able to do it this season, but Birchmeier has just been on fire.
And that's not saying that Tackett's can't do that, because we've seen it before as well, that TJ Tackett's towards the end of last season was also a monster on base. Once he got some reps at first base. They were moving him around, seeing where he could go.
And now he's been put out to center field this season, which he's done a fairly good job out there. Does not have an error this year, 28 putouts. That hasn't really been too much of a concern.
Exactly. And, I mean, that's kind of a similar thing with Gunnar Antillian, where you like him more for his fielding ability than you do for what he brings on base. But at the end of the day, you still need that production on base. Antillian also one of those guys that's in a little bit of a rut.
Yeah, Gunnar Antillian, in my opinion, I would love to see him be moved down the starting lineup, the batting order, just a little bit. He's been the 1 or 2 hole hitter nearly this entire season. On the year, Antillian's now batting just .244. He also has 4 errors in the field, .955 fielding percentage. That's been a little interesting. He's slugging just .282, 3 doubles, 3 ribbies, .318 on base percentage. None of those splits particularly good. And you look at his hitting, he has just 2 hits in the past 3 games total. His last multi-hit game came back on February 28th against Southern Indiana. He had, I believe right there, it's 4 multi-hit games up until the 28th. And since then, the most he's had in a game is 1. He hasn't been producing the on-base numbers, the hits that you'd love to see from a leadoff guy. Like you said, he's just been in a little bit of a rut. He's gotten hits here and there to keep hitting streaks alive and stuff, but just has not been a high on base guy after the first couple weeks of the season when he broke onto the scene.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It almost feels like we're pulling the bad out of a pile of gold right now. We're pulling out the bent coins because, I mean, there's really just so much good happening with this program.
If we do want to highlight another guy who has stepped up, I will do that. And Garrett Wright. I think Garrett Wright, if you want to look at the other side of it, he's been absolutely incredible after a great freshman season last year. Right now, let me count this 7-game hitting streak for Garrett Wright currently. And he has just really caught fire for this Falcons team on the season. Garrett Wright's batting .400 on the dot in 18 games. He has 5 doubles, 3 triples, 3 homers, 14 runs batted in. He is slugging .708 this season with a .534 on base percentage.
That's amazing.
Yeah, all of those numbers, basically all those numbers on pace to be better or are already better than his MAC Freshman of the Year campaign last season.
You want to hear something else even more wild that you can add on top of that?
Tell me, Chaz.
So he, so far in his career, has been hit by pitches 29 times. And
actually, we're up to 31 times.
Is it? Dang it. I was just looking right now. Is it 31?
It's up to 31. He's been hit 10 times this season.
So if that's the case, he needs to get hit by 2 more pitches this season to break the all-time program record here at Bowling Green, set by, I believe, Tyler Blanton, I want to say, in 2010. So from 2007 to 2010, TJ Blanton, set the record with 32 hit by pitches. He just needs 2 more to pass that, and this guy is a sophomore.
He's a pitch magnet. He's a guy that crowds that plate. He's not afraid to get out of the way. He's a tough guy. Catchers are always tough guys. And he's willing to get hit by a pitch and take first base, go 90 feet, and get the next guy up in the batting or a chance to bring him in.
Yeah, so, a lot to be excited about for almost all these programs. We're saying goodbye to hockey, probably women's basketball. And
I think women's basketball still has a postseason run in them. I think they get another shot. I think they make it into the WNIT. If not, maybe the tournament. I escape my name. I think it's like the CBI or something. Right below that. They won't get into the newer one that was created last season. That's now above the WNIT. But I think they can slot in well on that WNIT this year.
I can agree with that. And again, saying goodbye almost assuredly to men's basketball with the injury woes.
I can't imagine they make one.
So now we're just fully in springtime now. We've got some softball, we got some baseball to hold us over. But yeah, I think that's going to do us for this episode of the Zig Zone. Want to say thank you to all of the co-hosts here going left to right. We've got Henry Costco. Wow, almost. I was going to say wholesale. I was fighting really hard not to say wholesale.
Yep. Costco like the store. That's right.
Henry Costco, Tyler Kavelitz, Nathan Burkett, and Kevin Hutchinson. We're all saying goodbye here. Don't forget that we've got a ton of content coming out this next week with baseball, softball calls at home. We've got the swoop on Tuesdays, and we've got so much stuff going on here. So once again, want to say thank you to everybody here. You've been listening to the Zig Zone on 88.1 or WBGU 88.1 FM.